This is the oldest computer ever discovered. It is called the Antikythera Mechanism, and it was found in 1901 by sponge divers near the Greek island of Antikythera. But that's not really what this is about, because what they found down there among the ruins of a Roman-era shipwreck dating back to around 100 BC was corroded fragments of bronze. And when they brushed off that corrosion, they found some really complex gears. Like here's one gear with 36 equally spaced teeth. Here's another with 27 teeth. And if you look closely at the teeth, you can see that they're not simple little triangles. They're actually shaped like arcs of circles. So these gears were able to mesh together with incredible precision. And if you have two gears with evenly spaced teeth that mesh together, then you have a gearbox. And if you add a third gear to the mix, then you have a differential. And it turns out that's exactly what this mechanism contains. 3 bronze dials set into an outer frame, all rotating independently of each other. And because of the way those gears are shaped, we know that the first dial was probably used to set the time in hours. The second dial could show the minutes, and the third dial could display seconds. Not that the average person would be looking at their watch and seeing seconds in the year 40 BC, but that is exactly what is being depicted right here in this old drawing from 1902. A guy looking at his watch, seeing seconds. So we've got 3 rotating dials that turn at different speeds depending on how many teeth are on the gears inside. What else do we need for our first ancient computer? Well, if you wanted to calculate something, you needed numbers. And it just so happens that on the backside of this mechanism, researchers have found these numbers. Not written in letters, mind you, but etched into a series of rods. These are probably representing the numbers 1 through 12, and the rods were likely inserted into corresponding holes to display the numerals. Maybe a hand would then be moved along the rods to indicate a value. Or maybe the rods themselves would rotate behind a window like the dials on an oven. This is speculation, but either way, you had a readout for your calculations. Now all you need to do the calculating is a CPU, a central processing unit. You need some way to take inputs and use those inputs to update the outputs. And yes, guess what? It just so happens that on the front side of the Antikythera Mechanism, researchers have found this mysterious knob. We do want to know exactly what it does because we do want to know how the Antikythera Mechanism works exactly. But based on its placement and the fact that only this part of the mechanism survives today, we think it's a winding knob. It's a thing that you'd wind up to make the whole contraption work. You see, these bronze fragments were discovered loose in the seabed, not attached to any sort of device, so we're missing a lot of parts. But if we stick a crank in the hole and we assume that this knob winds a spring, then as you turn the knob, you wind up the spring, and once you're done winding the spring, you can release it and let it unwind, which will drive the gears and turn the dials. And if you're thinking, yeah, but why not just have the spring drive the dials directly instead of having a crank at all? Well, that's a great question, and we think the answer lies in the fact that you wound this thing up every hour. That's what we think you had to do, wind it up every single hour to get it to work. And that makes sense because this thing was built to tell the time. You could use it to track the phases of the moon. You could use it to track the cycles of the seasons. You could even use it to track eclipses. But in order to do any of that, you have to keep it wound up. Just think about a modern-day analog clock. If you want to keep the clock running, you have to keep winding it up, usually every 8 hours or so. And guess what? There's a little motor inside that little clock that's driving the hands. In fact, the entire mechanism that drives the hands on modern analog clocks is more complex than the Antikythera Mechanism. But I still think it's cool that these gears are older than recorded history. And if you find yourself wondering who made them, I'll go ahead and direct your attention towards this artifact known as the Archimedes plate. This is the oldest known piece of scientific notation. It's also the oldest known demonstration of the Pythagorean theorem, and it dates back to 200 BC, about 200 years before the Antikythera Mechanism was lost at sea, and it was created by Archimedes, the same dude responsible for giving us the Archimedes spiral and the Archimedes screw and the Archimedean solid. He was also a mathematician, physicist, engineer, inventor, and astronomer. And the last one is important because in addition to this plate, archaeologists found this tablet, and this tablet has a bunch of markings on it. And when they deciphered the markings, they realized they were astronomical tables, essentially a pre-programmed super-accurate ephemeris that allowed astronomers to predict the positions of the moon and planets. And that sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? Because we still use astronomical tables to predict the positions of the moon and planets, but instead of writing them on clay tablets, we write them into algorithms and load them onto computers. It turns out that computers are incredibly useful for crunching numbers, especially really complicated numbers like pi and 0.309. Did you know that pi can never be written out in full? It's an irrational number. Every time you write down more digits of pi, more decimals, the list goes on forever without repeating. But every time you try to write it down, you have to round off some portion of it. And sometimes rounding off too many digits of pi can have disastrous consequences. Like consider this painting of a dome. It was designed by a team of architects and engineers using early computers, and their calculations told them that the dome should be 128 feet wide and 75 feet tall. But when construction started, they realized that the dome was 2 inches too narrow, and because of all of the symmetries involved, there was no way to fix it without tearing the entire thing down and starting over. It was a total disaster, and it is amazing to me that humans have been dealing with problems like this for literally thousands of years. I mean, take a look at the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's 756 feet wide, but it's only 455 feet tall. Those are measurements that are remarkably close to the square root of to a constant that's going to pop up in any situation where you're trying to find the longest possible straight line between 2 points in a plane. So it is no surprise that ancient civilizations knew the value of pi to be somewhere between 3 and 4. But what is surprising is how accurate their estimates were. The Babylonians calculated that pi was between 3 and 10, which isn't great, but the Egyptians were off by only 1%. The Babylonians calculated that pi was between 3 and 10, which isn't great, but the Egyptians were off by only 1%. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.